So, interestingly, peace is what the egoic personality structure is trying so hard to avoid, because it's in activity that the sense of self really thrives. Those of you who have gone on in-person retreat, you know that it takes a couple of days typically to settle down from our worldly activity and function. And as we settle down and get quieter, there can be some resistance from the sense of self. Basically, I don't like getting this quiet. I don't like going this deep. Let's stay on the surface. This is my territory. So there's this kind of a little tug-of-war that happens, or a push-pull that happens in our inner world as we start orienting towards the deep stillness and the just magnificent peace of the Absolute. So with peace and stillness, when we make contact, we relax. Surrendering becomes easier. Letting go of fixed positions becomes easier. And we begin to allow the Absolute to function more on its own, deliberately, where instead of it, the Absolute is functioning and doing everything anyway, but we're settling down and we're getting out of the way. I told somebody I didn't realize how much effort I put into the first probably 20 years of my practice life, simply getting out of my own way. I was really my own, the expression, my own worst enemy, because I would constantly fiddle and tinker and try and get somewhere, try to learn techniques that were beneficial. And part of what I didn't learn for a long time was that not every technique is always the right application. There are times when we need to really bring our sort of artist perspective and realize that not everything fits every time. Sometimes we need something different. So it allows a little more openness, and this is where we allow the Absolute to function more fully and freely. So when we make contact with peace, part of what can happen, part of what some of you were describing, is that we can have a kind of anxiety or fear reaction in the personality. The personality really doesn't like the prospect or the possibility of it losing control. Because if I lose control, then I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to not be able to function sufficiently, so I won't be able to earn a living. I will be this couch potato, sort of comatose blob, so others won't want to relate to me in any way, so all of my relationships will end. And ultimately, because I can't work and I can't relate to others, I will lose whatever housing I have. So it's the combination that I'm going to end up homeless and insane and unrelatable. This is sort of the projected fear or anxiety that many people have. But in reality, by making contact with peace, we begin to see who we really are without the reactivity and the reactions that normal life circumstances trigger in the personality. So the likes and dislikes soften and quiet. We start accepting more and opening more, making direct contact. And we get to where we begin to realize that being in the deep blackness, in that deep peace and stillness, actually is rejuvenative. We're getting like a juice. We're getting a energy that's beneficial, that's coming into our system. And things are beginning to right themselves. We're understanding. This is where the intuitive knowing develops. We begin to understand relationships on a level that's not the normal thinking level. We just know things. And again, things make their own connection. This is where we're really letting the Absolute function in its own intelligence. Peace is present when there is no dukkha, when there's no dissatisfactoriness. So what that's saying is when we are deeply content, when we are not seeking pleasure or avoiding pain in relation to the personality. So we're relaxing likes and dislikes, and we're landing more in contentedness and acceptance. We relax, the world begins to work better. The great aspect of each of these qualities of the Absolute, particularly peace and stillness, is whatever they contact becomes peaceful and still. So by just being open and by having a sustained contact with the unmanifest Absolute, we're making deeper and deeper contact with peace and stillness, with acceptance, and also with the quality of absence that's a chief function of the unmanifest Absolute. So we're feeling that nothingness. At first it feels to be this problematic experience. That famous line from the philosopher Nietzsche that about looking into the abyss. And I think the line goes, if you look into the abyss long enough, you realize the abyss is looking back. And this is what's unnerving. We want to, from the personality perspective, we want to keep control and manage everything that's happening so bad things don't happen. And so we don't die. And going into this deep, unending peace, this blackness that just absorbs, welcomes everything, and that stillness, it's unnerving. It's the opposite of what the personality is doing. And we can't treat peace as a kind of commodity, like going to the grocery store and buying some bread. It doesn't work that we can go out, find peace, collect it, cultivate it, bag it up, take it home. It's an experience. It's a quality that's always present, but we have to relax the doing. We have to relax our conviction that my worldview from the personality is the most correct view. That needs to soften. It's one reality. I don't know how many of you were exposed to the writings of Carlos Castaneda. If you don't know who that is, he was a graduate student at University of California, Los Angeles in the 60s in anthropology, and he ended up focusing his research and his dissertation, both his master's thesis and PhD dissertation, on shamanism. And he went down to Mexico, ended up connecting up with some shaman there, and then wrote about his experiences in a series of books. They became very, very popular. I first read one of his books in the late 60s when I was a young teenager, and it was a perfect placement because it was shamanism and all sorts of fantastic journeys and things were happening, and they also were ingesting psychedelics, peyote and other psychedelics for spiritual purposes in ritual. And of course, drug use was just getting started in the world in an active way among the youth. So it was sort of he did a great job of finding an audience. Very, very popular books. I'm not going to go into a lot of what he wrote about, but what's interesting is there's a discussion about something called the assemblage point. And as I understand how that term is used, basically the energy flows of the body have different intersections. And based on where we give our attention, what intersection we operate from affects our view of reality. And so one of the particular intersections, or one of the positions of the assemblage point, is going to be completely in personality, completely in a me, and going to have the world view that the world is the way the personality believes it to be. And part of what happens when we do spiritual work, when we work with teachers, when we do these practices that open to the absolute, is we're inviting a shift of the assemblage point. We're inviting it to not be fixed in the normal position of personality view. And this is what happens with greater and greater quantity of realization, of succeeding Kensho experiences. In my view, the assemblage point gets more fluid, where it begins working and operating and assembling in different ways, in different viewpoints. And so that's part of why we can have these different experiences and open to things, because our viewpoint becomes less fixed. Anyway, so I'm just borrowing from that body of literature. And just a little aside, actually, I ended up meeting Carlos Castaneda. He was a very mysterious character, but I ended up meeting him at a bookstore in Los Angeles once, and actually bought a tribal decorated bowl that he was selling out of this bookstore. He owned the bookstore. And anyway, I didn't know it was him for many years. He lied and told me he was not Carlos Castaneda. And later I saw a picture of him, and it was him. But anyway, another aside.